All right, hi, hello everybody. My name is Alyssa and I'm here today at the Revolutionary Students Union in Salt Lake City to talk about sexism and the revolution and fighting for egalitarianism within leftist movements. I would like to include some trigger warnings. My lecture does include mention of sexual slurs, violence against women, and rape. So here I have a quote from Assata Shakur. She says, "Nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them." And I wanted to include this quote because I've given somewhat similar, or lectures on similar topics before, and I've always written and prepared my lectures to be directed to women. I've always said anyone who wanted to attend was welcome, but I always sort of imagine women as my target audience because I truly believe that this quote is true. I don't think women within the left are going to obtain equality by appealing to the moral sense of men who knowingly or unknowingly are perpetuating, the patriarchal society that we live in onto us. However, when I first made a motion that I would give this lecture, within minutes, I had a male revolutionary approach me and say, "Well, let me ask you, do you really think there is sexism within the left?" And after I finished banging my head against the wall, I thought about it, and I thought, if he seemed to be very genuine and very confused as to why I would even want to be discussing such a subject. So I have also included elements in this lecture that are directed to men who may honestly be confused and curious, and I have included some things that men can also do in the fight for egalitarianism. Okay. So why does sexism exist in the left? I have a quote from a woman who's very inspiring to me. Her name is Jess Sundin. And she said, "The root of it is women's oppression in society and male chauvinism in society. It's not our movements or our organizations that is to blame. We pull in a lot of garbage from the society that we live in." There's a very common theme or idea in our culture of men taking active roles and women playing more of a support system. The most obvious examples I could think of might be an office full of men where women are the secretaries or getting them coffee, or male doctors with female nurses assisting them. And even though statistically that may be slowly starting to change within our society, that theme and that idea is still very common and very stubborn and is being kind of slow to recede. So I think a lot of times within movements and organizing, a lot of men show up and they sort of feel the sense of entitlement that they're going to come in and they're going to be the big revolutionary heroes, and the women are kind of going to flock around them and do whatever it is that they need the women to do in order for them to carry out the movement. And that sort of sets up this sort of situation that you'll see sometime. Men will be organizing, men will be giving lectures, and women will kind of be like, "Well, I'll go post the flyers then." And I think that's the root cause of a lot of it. So, I might find the answer to this question kind of obvious, but so why is gender equality important in the left? Well, first of all, because it's what's right. If we want to call ourselves revolutionaries, if we want to call ourselves radicals, egalitarians, Marxists, anarchists, what have you, if we're going to be fighting for national liberation, if we're going to fight for class equality, it would just seem to follow to me that women's rights have to be included within that as well. But there's a secondary answer, and that is that if women are being excluded from other movements, your numbers are instantly being cut in half. So if women are staying away or being driven away from anti-war movements, from national liberation movements, those movements are going to be inherently weaker because they only have half of the radicals fighting for their cause. So what is something we as women can do? Well, we can take a closer look at our revolutionary history. Here we have several Black Panther women at an event, and I was reading some works by Kathleen Cleaver, and you know, she said that within recent years she's had a lot of women coming and asking her, well, what was it like being a woman in the Black Panther movement? You know, it was such a male-dominated movement. It was so masculine. You know, what was it like for you as a woman to be involved in all that? And she said the first few times she heard it, she just had to laugh, because she said women were always there. By the end of the movement, women, it was predominantly being organized and led by women. But she said what would happen were these sexist male reporters would show up, and there would be this huge mass organization, and they'd focus in on a couple of these really cool, badass looking guys with guns, and take their picture and say, well, what are you doing here? What is it you're so angry about? You know, what is it you're out to do? And they would write down everything they had to say, and that's what would be published. And the women of the Black Panther movement were ignored. On the previous slide, I had a photo of women in Cuba, and I think that's another really important movement that we could study and learn about the role that the women movement played within the Cuban Revolution. So I want to get into some particulars of things that I've noticed within some of our particular movements and works that I've been involved in, and the women who've worked in really closely have been involved in. So there's two women here. There's Sarah Palin and there's Margaret Thatcher. I don't like these people. I hate these people. I would imagine most of the people here would feel the same way. But they're not bitches, and they're not cunts. And when I hear the men who I work with who say they are my revolutionary comrades, they're my brothers, and they use these words, I don't care who they're referring to, it sickens me to my stomach, and it fills me with rage. It is every bit abominable to say that about these women than it would be for a white radical to call Marco Rubio a quote-unquote spick, or to call Clarence Thomas a quote-unquote nigger. Bitch, cunt, slash, slut are the words that men use in our society when they beat women. It is the words that men use in our society when they rape women, and it is the words that men use in our society when they kill women. And if you are perpetuating that in any way, shape, or form, it is evil, and it needs to stop. If you are a woman and you hear these words, do not slink back and look at your shoes. I understand. I know. I was brought up in our patriarchal society. It is installed in us from the moment we are born to be good girls, and then we grow up and it shifts into something that I think is even more insidious, because it's, oh, come on, just be cool. Just let it slide. Just be cool. If we let this slide, we are letting oppression slide, and it is unacceptable. Okay, appearance. I think it is very difficult to get men to understand what our society does to women. It turns all of our lives into beauty contests from the moment we are born. This is a more extreme example, but this is what happens. Here we have a 6-month-old baby who has been crowned the most beautiful baby in her beauty pageant. And here we have a toddler screaming as they're pinning her winning pageant crown onto her head. It's more rare, but I've heard before a female revolutionary will say something that she may not realize is problematic or backwards. And the male's response is, God, yeah, and she's got a fat gut, doesn't she? One, it has nothing to do with the situation, and two, it's taking the problem of what a person has said and reducing it to something as infinitesimally insignificant as their physical appearance, which is meaningless. And it's just used to beat women down instead of furthering the conversation as to why what was said was problematic or wrong. Now, I've heard that happen. That's more rare. What's more common is to reduce women's worth to their aesthetic appearance and to value them for being beautiful. One thing that's always stuck with me, I think it was like the third event I'd attended. I had just gotten into the revolutionary scene, and I was so excited to go to this big protest event that I skipped class. I was one of those kids that always loved school, and I was always excited to go and learn something new, and I never ever skipped class a day of my life, but I was this is important and I'm gonna be there no matter what. So I skipped class, I took the bus, I go down this event, I'm so excited. And I didn't even realize what an accomplishment it was because I hadn't been involved very much. But the event was almost exclusively attended by women. There were 2 men, all the rest were women. So I'm there and I'm so excited, I'm so pumped, and we're getting set up. And I think it was already October, but it was still pretty warm out. So one of the guys says I'm gonna go run and get a case of water, bring it back for everybody. So we're okay, yeah, thanks brother. So he leaves and we're hanging out, talking about the event and everything. And this guy comes up. And I'm talking to the other man who's there, and this guy comes up, he says to the man, he says hey, I gotta ask you something. I'm oh my goodness, is this a supportive person who's coming to tell us way to go, or is this some backwards reactionary here to threaten us? What's gonna happen? And the guy says, I just wanna know how you could get so many beautiful women to come out here with you today. And the guy laughed. And he said, well, that's easy to get beautiful women to come out and do revolution, because all revolutionary women are the most beautiful women. And I understand why he said that. You're not really gonna reach every whack job on the street, as most of you probably found out. But I was really new to revolution. I was really excited to be there. And in that moment, I just felt like I was nothing. I felt like me and all the other women there were just window dressing for this man, and he was a proud, strong revolutionary out on the street standing up for what was right. And we were there to make him look cooler. All right, so I want to talk about interruption. I think most of us as kids growing up, we get the lesson, it's rude to interrupt. If somebody's talking, you should let them finish what they have to say. And I think the majority of our thoughts about that would be well, we kind of all probably fall short on that now and again, but we should really, try better, whatever. But there's this really interesting phenomenon in our culture. Sociologists have studied this and found that women rarely interrupt each other, and they will almost never interrupt a man when he's speaking. Men will occasionally interrupt other men when they're speaking, but they will very often interrupt women. Now, if you're already in a social construct that values men's voices and men's opinions more so than women's, when a man interrupts a woman, whether knowingly or not, what he's saying is, I matter more than you. My thoughts on this matter more than you. I know more than you, so shut up. And what I would really encourage, men to do here in this situation is to just be mindful of it. If you're in a conversation, you realize you've interrupted a woman, just apologize, encourage her to finish her thought. If you're a woman and a man interrupts you, say, no, excuse me, let me finish making my point, and then I'll listen to what you say. Or if you see it being done, say the same thing. Encourage her to finish her point. Say, it matters to me. I want to know what you have to say. I feel like you were making a good point. Please continue with what you were saying. All right. I want to talk now about something else. I want to talk about dating within leftist movements. I think, the idea of entering into a romantic relationship with someone that you work with very closely politically, it should be very heavily considered. Sometimes it works out, but when it doesn't, it can end very badly. Usually at least one, if not both of the people wind up leaving the movement. That dwindles our numbers, so that can be problematic in and of itself. that being said, that much is my 2 cents. It's not my business or my place to tell anybody who they can or cannot have consensual sex with. I would never presume to do so. I am not some, Victorian sex police. What I will say is that men should not ever, ever, ever approach a woman or a gender minority person in order to pursue a romantic or sexual relationship. And men don't like to hear me say that. Especially white men. They seem to get like really, really pissy when I say that. My favorite argument that they like to make back to me is, well, who are you to say that? Who are you to say that I can't just ask a woman if she's interested in spending time with me and then she can choose to say yes or no? If you're telling me that I should take that choice away from her, you're saying women can't decide for themselves. You've become the patriarchal oppressor of woman now. That's the white man logic you get there. And the thing is, that logic would make a certain amount of sense if we lived in a society with gender equality. But we don't. That's what most of us are here fighting for. We're fighting because we don't. And I just noticed this trend. Some woman comes into the movement and she's either passionate about a cause or she's heard a speaker who's really interested in her, and she comes to either to learn or to take part in an action, and she's just instantly like flocked upon by all these guys, and they're asking her out or hitting on her, and it's so overwhelming. And it just boils down to the fact that men do not understand what it is like to live and walk in a woman's shoes. It's when you're asking a woman if she's interested in spending time with you, she's not sitting there thinking, well, gee, do I or don't? She's thinking, if I tell this guy no, how bad is it going to be? How bad is it going to be? Is he just going to call me a bitch and leave it at that? Is he gonna hit me? Women have been murdered for rejecting men before. And when some woman comes in and she's new to the movement and she's excited and she's really passionate about what she wants to do and what she wants to accomplish, if half the men in the room ask her out, then she has to come back into a room and be frightened of how half of them are going to treat her, of what they're going to say to her, of what they're going to tell other guys about her. Chances are she's not going to come back. And if we're losing revolutionaries because men in our movement are more interested in treating it as some kind of like radical OK Cupid, it's inexcusable. And that's why I say it should not happen ever. Just to drive home the point, here's some examples of women being abused for rejecting men. This is from a dating site. This guy sent a message to this woman. He says, "Hello, I'm Stan. It's so nice to meet you. You're so attractive to me, and I just love your cute face." And let me see how much time went by. 12 minutes go by that she doesn't send a reply. And he says, "You stuck up bitch. I would beat the living shit out of you." Here, the one on the other side, the guy says, "Wow, your legs are really nice." 4 hours later, he says, "What are you doing right now?" And it doesn't show a time difference, so it has to be less than a minute. He says, "Okay then." And within another minute, he says, "Why don't you learn how to take a compliment and how not to be a stuck-up cunt? I hope you do end up killing yourself, you worthless bitch." Yeah, so there's just a woman in the back saying that that's happened to her before. So this male logic of like, I'm just gonna ask, she can say yes or no, it's all up to her. You could mean that. You could be like the most like perfectly respectful, like, all right, understood, good day then to you. But this is what she's wondering in the back of her head is gonna happen if she says no. So like the way I would prefer like the issue of relationships to be handled is sort of similar to well, I heard a really interesting story from a Black Panther about Afeni Shakur. She is Assata Shakur's sister. And she was working one day at the Panther headquarters, And there's this guy comes in, he's kind of new, and he approaches a female Black Panther and he says, "Hey, what's happening, baby?" She said, "Oh, the revolution is what is happening, and I'm not anybody's baby." And she turns and walks away. So Afeni Shakur pulls him into the next room, and she was like, "Dude, what are you doing, man?" And the guy's like, "Well, I just liked her. I just wanted to say hi. I'm just being polite. I'm just being friendly. I just wanted to talk to her. What?" And she said, "All right, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you how you want to speak to a radical woman. You say, 'Good evening, sister. All power to the people.' And she'll say, 'Good evening, brother. How are you?' And then what you say is, 'Oh, I am just so tired. I had to be up at 4 so I could catch the subway to get down and cook breakfast for the kids over at the breakfast program, and then I was delivering the newsletters all mid-morning, and then, I had to go plan for the rally. That's going to be next week, and I've just been going like nonstop like this for a week.'" And of course you'll say that, because that'll be true, right? You'll be busy, right? Because you're here to do radical work, right? So then when you say that, if she has any interest in speaking with you further, she could say, "Whoa, it sounds like you are just exhausted. Maybe you should relax for a while. Would you like to go do something fun with me?" And then if she says that, you can take that from there. All right. So the single most important thing I can stress for supporting women on the left and for women to support each other on the left is solidarity. If you see a woman being treated chauvinistically, say something. Call it out. The only thing worse for a woman to hear that language or that sort of treatment from someone who she's supposed to be having this comradely relationship with is then to feel like she's all alone when it's happening. Say something right then, right there. Say, "I see this. This is wrong. This is unacceptable. I will help you fight this to fix this so it does not ever happen again." Listen to women's voices. Like, invite women. Have women give more of the lectures. They should give lectures about women's issues. They should give lectures about the roles women have played in the relationships, as I mentioned, the women in the Black Panther movement, the women in the Cuban Revolution movement. Study more about female revolutionaries. There are many female revolutionaries. There are many female radical writers, and they tend to get overlooked a lot in favor of radical men. It might be a good idea. A lot of groups have meetings specifically for women to gather and discuss any ideas or problems they think have arose and how to best treat them. And I think that might be, that could be a potentially useful tool in situations that call for it. So that kind of wraps up what I've had here today. I'd love to open it up for questions, comments. If anybody would like to share anything about what I've said or experiences they've had, I'd love to hear it. Yes?
Okay, so I'm going to try to word this the right way, but I think that you presented a lot of, good information, and, it's very important. But at the same time, I'm someone who's from, the outside, because I noticed that most of it is directed at men and women, right? And a lot of it is directed at heterosexual men and women. So as a person who doesn't pertain to either one of those groups, I'm not sure how to interpret this. So I was wondering some of those things can be taken, for example, if you see a woman being sexually harassed in the movement, you should obviously say something, and things like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, what advice do you have for people who don't pertain to these two groups?
Okay, and just to repeat it for the recording, the question was, what advice would I have to people who are within the radical movement who are sort of outside of the heterosexual norm and don't identify as belonging to either the male group or the female group? I mean, I would think that patriarchy and male oppression would also oppress like gender minorities in a lot of the same type of ways. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it may have been, you know, on me for wording certain things, perhaps not in the way that I should have. You know, I would try to collect my thoughts for a minute. Well, I mean, because I would think a lot of the advice would sort of still be, I mean, applicable. Just so I understand, was there really any part of the lecture where you felt like the role was unclear?
So I'm not necessarily saying that it's unfair. I guess what I'm saying is, so many. Sorry, when it comes to like gender roles, I see a lot of like, you know, men should do this, women should do this, type of things in your lecture, and that's where I get kind of confused for myself because of gender roles. You know what I mean? Okay, so yeah, it's men's, you know, like men should do this to stop sexism in the left movement. Women should do this to stand up for themselves and to stand up for their fellow sisters. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so the way I've taken it is, okay, so I should try really hard not to be sexist towards other people. I should also try really hard to stand up for myself when people are sexist towards me, and not be, you know, and stand up for other people who are being, you know, treated unfairly. But I guess the example I want to give you is, earlier today I was talking to somebody online, mm-hmm. and it's a trans woman. And that trans woman was saying trans men are creeps. And when I kind of tried to talk to her about elaborating it further, she was like, well, all men are creeps. All men enforce the patriarchy and things like that, and that includes trans men. But specifically because she was talking about trans men, I kind of got confused there, because I feel like, you know, trans men, depending on, or just transgender people in general, depending on when you discover your identity, depending on when you decide to come out and start transitioning. You know, we were all still raised, most of us anyway, you know, more people are starting to raise their kids androgynously, but most people nowadays have been raised within the binary and raised with their assigned gender. So I guess the thing that threw me off there was, I would think that trans men at one point understood the struggle of women, because a lot of them grew up as women. I'm a non-binary person. Mm-hmm. I grew up as a woman. I, for a long time, thought I was a trans man. So I guess that's what throws me off there, as well as, like, you know, trans women, you know, grew up with male privilege until they start transitioning and start experiencing trans misogyny, right? So, like, do you get what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I understand, you know, the point that you're making. I'm not so sure as far as, I feel like as far as the points I was making within, you know, my lecture, I feel like it would be inclusive of trans and non-binary people as, you know, as far as the steps to take against, you know, the patriarchy, when you do see, like, people who identify as males behaving in patriarchal ways.
No, I get that.
Okay.
I get that. I was just, again, I was confused as to how it relates to people that don't pertain to the binary. That's all.
Okay. I mean, yeah, please.
Sorry. I think, like, you did get it. Like, I mean, like, when you summarize what you got out of Alyssa's lecture, I think that's exactly what you're supposed to get. In ways that, like, you're supposed to stand up against patriarchy, you're supposed to support, like, women who are being oppressed in that kind of situation. And I think that was the point of the lecture. So it sounds like you got it, and I'm not trying, like, maybe there are other things that are unclear, that maybe a more productive conversation, you could, like, have, like, a more personal productive conversation, because it doesn't seem like it's, like, really elements of the lecture that you didn't get, but you're also just maybe confused about, like, how it directly applies to you personally. Like, I don't know, maybe that's something that you could discuss. Like, I don't know, maybe not, but it just seems like you did get, like, all of the
well, yeah, I mean, I get
things that she was trying to share with us today.
No, that part I do get. No, I understand how sexism applies when it comes to cis people, I guess. I guess what I'm trying to say is I wanted to see a little more of, like, I'm not gonna say I expected it, but I wanted to see a little more of, like, what do we do in terms of sexism towards transgender?
I think
yeah,
like
trans and non-binary people.
Adrian, if, like, that's another, like do a lecture on that. I think that would be, like, fantastic, you know, would be useful for everyone. But I feel like you're asking a question that's not really in the scope of what the lecture was, but maybe that's just.
Yeah, I think a lecture on that would be a great idea.
I think that would be really good, like, as a future idea for, like, lectures and stuff, because maybe it didn't go over all of those things, but elements, but it would be something that would be useful to all of us.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay. So thanks to both of you. Was there anything else? Yes.
So I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have kind of, I guess, a comment and a question, but I'll make both of them brief. I guess maybe an important takeaway from the presentation is that anybody can be sexist. Women, genderqueer people to women. I mean, the focus of the lecture is about women and how people mistreat them and how it is that we fight against that. Frequently, not only with genderqueer people or people transitioning to another gender, but also people of different sexual influences think that they're not capable of being sexist. For instance, like a gay man feels like, you know, a woman's body is totally on limits because, you know, he's not sexually attracted to them, you know, that sort of thing. Or that, like, he can use that sort of language because he's not interested in doing bad things to her or whatever have you. So, I mean, I feel like the conversation is relevant if you focus on where you are in position to sexism against women and relationships to patriarchy, because obviously women can reinforce patriarchy, which leads me to my actual question, which is, your presentation focused a lot about the way that men should be intervened on, both by women and other men. But there wasn't a lot of conversation about how women should be intervened on by other women when they're reinforcing those same problems. And I feel like it's always like a taboo topic whenever anybody gives a presentation on this. And it's not, I don't feel like it's my point to criticize it, but I feel like that was kind of like an element that was missing. So, and I know you have thoughts on it, so what are your thoughts on it?
Well, you know, I guess what I'm interpreting that, you know, if I'm understanding correctly, you know, what it is you're saying. I mean, sure, women absolutely can, like, self-internalize the patriarchy and then turn around and, like, inflict it on to other women. That can happen with oppressed groups of all kind. I don't necessarily feel like any of the like strategies I presented on how to handle it would be different. If it is a woman perpetuating sexism onto another woman, I would also recommend as far as the things I suggested to say or to do to say the same things, to, point out how that was, an inappropriate comment, or it was a sexist comment that was, irrelevant to the problem or the issue that was at hand. I would say the same thing if you see like women perpetuating sexism or patriarchy onto other women as well.
So maybe let me summarize what I heard you say, and then if that's correct, then the message received. But you're saying that the way in which people should intervene against sexist ideas or comments or behaviors against a woman should be the same way that you intervene on men or genderqueer people or whatever. Just like they're all treated the same in terms of interventions.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, just to summarize your comments, you're saying that the intervention on everybody who is sexist should be the same sort of approach. Does that correctly summarize your point?
I mean, in general, yes, sexism is sexism, and that's like fighting it was the point of the lecture. I don't think it's okay for anyone to perpetuate patriarchy or sexism onto anybody, and it should be handled appropriately every time.
So you're saying that it's appropriate to handle it the same way between, like, say, for instance, if a woman calls another woman a bitch, right, and versus a man that calls him a bitch, I mean, you give...
No, that's not, I don't think it's necessarily okay, but no, that's not the same thing. And I mean, do we need to really get into debate about that? It's one thing for a black person to say the N-word and a very different person for the white thing, and a very different thing for a white person to say the N-word. I mean, is there anybody here who's confused about that?
I feel like, though, that it is different to say the N-word to another black person, but like they've taken that word and made it into kind of a more positive, I feel like, right? But if he was saying it as like someone trying to oppress, would that be, like, if the girl is trying to say it in a negative way towards, I mean, it's a completely different thing, but should it be interceded on?
Because there's not the same, I feel like it's different because there is not the patriarchal power that backs it up. If she's trying to say to the person, yes, then that is different, but there's not that patriarchal power. As I said in my lecture, that word has so much power because of like the hundreds of years of like violence and social and political repression that comes behind it, and that's why it has more weight when it's a man who says it. Yes.
Maybe this is related to Jacob's question.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we should fight sexism wherever we find it, but also shouldn't men be very careful about fighting sexism? In which case, it might be just an excuse to criticize and attack women. I mean, I've seen this, which I think maybe is related to what you're saying.
I mean,
which
like,
is men should not just call out sexism among women in the same way that they can call out sexism among other men, because oftentimes it's used as a stick to beat people they don't agree with and say, well, you're sexist. I mean, do you think that that's a problem? Do you think that that's something that men, especially, even when calling out sexism among women, need to be extraordinarily careful about?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, there's some places some movements will have all male groups where they'll say, we're gonna all get together and discuss like how it is like that we should all like stop being sexist and we'll decide what the sexist problems are, and then they listen to nothing that any of the women have to say. That's not, best case scenario, that is not helpful at all. In all likelihood, it's gonna be harmful for reasons that I think are obvious. Yes?
So I guess in regards to Jacob's question, what I'm saying here is it's a question. I mean, it's a matter of dominance and oppression, right? Like, for example, the reason why the word bitch has more weight when a man says it is because how to put it, because they have, like you said, that patriarchal power that, you know, that they just had historically.
Mhm.
When a woman says it, it's almost like taking it and appropriating it, and like kind of how to put it, God, I can't think of the word, but like owning it. You know what I mean?
I think in some cases it may be, and you know, in other cases it may be, you know, more just used in a hurtful way. It could sometimes, I do know there are women who do that in an attempt to take the power back from that word. I think if it's being used in the opposite sense, if it is just being used to degrade another woman, it is problematic, but it is absent like the real, like, it's absent the power force that's behind it when men say it because of the patriarchy. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a privilege issue. Same thing with like the N-word is a privilege issue.
I don't know if I would.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm not so sure if I just agree with the phrasing on it 100%, but I do see what you're saying.
And perhaps it's not the best way of putting it, but like you get what I'm saying.
I feel like I do, yes.
Because of male privilege and all of that.
Right.
So some organizations have quotas where they say, like, if we have a big party and we have a central committee or whatever, 30% have to be women. Or there was one organization, I forget the name of it, where they just didn't allow men to be in leadership positions at all, or it had to be women.
Mhm.
It was like, there was a quota and there was a rule. How do you feel about quotas and like fixed kind of organizational things like that? Do you think they're
Yeah, I think
sometimes
that's-
a good idea? Or?
Yeah, I think they can be great, yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I just wanted to bring up something that I notice a lot is that don't use sexism to be a douchebag. Because sometimes I'll be on YouTube and I'll be watching a TED Talk about a certain topic, and there'll always be that one guy trying to turn it around and make it about them. And that pisses me off so bad because, like, we're not trying to insult you. We're not trying to say your topic is not important or you're not as important either. But we're talking about this at the moment, and we can get back to yours and we can talk about it too. But the majority is happening to women, and we're not trying to say that doesn't happen to you either. I'm not trying to say, like, oh, let's forget your problem. Don't try to get kind of selfish and think, oh, how dare you not include me? How dare you not include men? That's just like when people say all lives matter. It's like, no. Like, obviously, that's not fucking true. And it's like, don't take it to your ass, you know? Because we'll get back to you. We'll help you out, okay? Because feminism and these human rights. So you won't be forgotten. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I see that a lot in the comments and it makes me so mad. And then it makes me really mad too because it's on a computer and
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And yes, sadly, that would not be something that's relegated solely to YouTube comments, because then we could all log off of YouTube and be so much happier in life. However, it exists in the real world too. And I especially like the analogy you drew between the, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing you. The analogy you drew between like men trying to, you know, take the topics of like feminism or fighting patriarchy and turn it around back onto them, and with like white people going into like police brutality things and wanting to say all lives matter. Yeah. And one of the something interesting that stuck with me that I heard about the all lives matter movement was like, would you show up to like a cancer walk and run around screaming at like the people raising money for cancer, be like, you know, there's other diseases too, like, yeah.
Like, what if like something talking about the harms happening? Like I really hate when people say, "Oh, I have straight pride." I was like, well, I know I grew up being straight, and I was never, ever felt ashamed for being straight, and I know gay people who have. And it makes me so mad that they think that's something to be proud of, something that they didn't deserve, something that they didn't fight for to have. If you didn't fight for it, what makes you think you should be all proud of it?
Yeah, well, it takes like courage and like heteronormative culture to say like I'm proud to be gay. That takes courage. It takes zero courage to say like I'm proud to be straight. Oh, whoop-de-doo. Yeah, it must be really hard on you. And I mean, it takes a lot of courage to say like, yeah, I'm like proud to be a woman. I'm proud to be a feminist.
Yeah, and I've gotten shit for that, for saying, oh, I'm a feminist. And it makes me sad that I feel like I have to say, no, I don't hate women. Because it's like, I don't. Seriously, when I see comments about people saying that men can't get raped, that makes me seriously freaking mad. Because it is possible, and then when people say, especially if it's a woman saying that it's not possible, it makes me more mad because it's just adding to that stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
And then what makes it worse is when women become sexist. And then I'll get shit from women. I've even had my mom sometimes say some really sexist things because she just comes from a different culture and age. And so it's just hard to kind of be a feminist, and it's hard to just be a woman in general because sometimes I just feel afraid. Like I've always felt women's rights was important, but I noticed that I was always afraid to admit it because of how that whole, like how you brought up earlier, why don't you just have a joke about it? Like, don't take it serious. And then another thing that makes me mad are like kitchen jokes, like women belong in the kitchen. And if aren't, as a man, you should be offended too, because that joke is saying that you're not capable of doing cooking, you're not capable of cleaning for yourself, taking care of yourself. That's an insult to not just women, that's an insult to you.
I hadn't thought about it quite that way. I always took it more as like the men saying like, yeah, I'm so special and I have so many other skills. I don't need to do that for myself. I'll get somebody else,
Yeah, but that's because they're not seeing the actual insult
Yeah.
to genders. Because it's saying, so there's even a picture where it's mocking how a woman is working, the guy can't do the work and take care of it. And that's very untrue. A man can do women's work just as well as a woman can do men's work.
And it should be an insult, like, sorry to come there, but, get back into women going to the kitchen and all that shit it should feel like an insult to men, because basically it's saying that, that man never grew up, that he's not independent. Have you ever noticed that nobody ever questioned a man's independence? But women have to, nobody ever questions a man's independence, but it's, it's so ingrained in society for women not to be independent. The women have to go out there and be like, yeah, I'm independent, I can do things for myself, I don't need you. But, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Well, I just want to say that makes a lot of sense given the historical context, because with traditionally within Western society, women have usually been under the control of one man to the other. She's under the control of the father until she's given over to a husband, and that's why women still feel that stride. They have to say look, I'm independent. I'm doing this for myself. That comes from the material and historical realities of where we live.
Yeah, and even now, I still see it. I still see it now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When, how to put that? I still see it now, where it's normal for, or in society it's considered normal for a woman to depend on her partner, and it's how do I put that? You know what I mean? It's almost like you still have to fight that. I don't know, I still see it. I still see the need to acknowledge how important it is for I still see it as necessary to acknowledge how important women's independence is. You know, for example, like single moms. People often criticize single moms, right? Sorry, I'm like not there.
It's okay.
You got what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as like to your last comment, I would hope nobody here would ever criticize the woman that you were speaking about. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
Something else I saw that was asked a lot. Well, after that question, there was some girl saying, I don't know why girls find this offensive. I find it funny. Shut up. And two, and then there'll be some guys saying like, I wouldn't get offended if someone told me a girl told me to fix a computer or a car. And I'm like, one, you're comparing making a sandwich to freaking knowing how to do mechanics. And two, it's offensive because they're saying that you can't make a fucking sandwich. Like, doesn't that piss you off that they're saying, like, for guys, wouldn't you be mad if someone said that you're incapable of making a simple sandwich?
Yeah.
That would piss me off.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think there's a real, parallel for a man to tell a woman, well, like, no, that's not sexist. Well, it's like a white person telling a oppressed nationality, like, no, that wasn't racist. Like, shut the fuck up. They just told you that it was. You need to listen to what they're saying. That's my view on those kind of arguments.
Yeah, it makes me upset too because I see some women try to make themselves so cool to the male gender. It's like, no, don't do that. You're oppressing yourself when you do that. You're letting them oppress you. You can't do that. It's scary to confront because I know that deep down inside they want to feel like, actually that wasn't funny, that offended me. So, if you're female, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. And if you're a male, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself because I know some people can be extremely sexist towards men too. And so, just, if you see oppression, don't be afraid to speak up.
Yes.
So I don't know if you'll have any comments for this, because I'm not sure that it's in the background. But especially Chicano, Mexicano, and Latino people, there's a history of very strong patriarchy. In fact, it has a word, it's machismo, right? Machismo is to be strong, be a man's man, a real man. And then the female version is marianismo, which is to be like Mary, right? The long-suffering person who, deals with all the horrible things that happen in life and just goes up with it. Do you see any particular approach to dealing with sexism among oppressed nationalities? Or is that something that kind of we have to deal with? And I'm not saying that in like a flippant way. Like, is it that oppressed nationalities have to deal with sexism within their own movements, or is that something that is fine for other people outside to intervene, or what would you think is the appropriate solution?
This is more just coming from, my own opinions, my own history with organizing that I've done, and sort of my own instincts with that way. I feel like that is a movement that should be led by oppressed nationality women who then, I think it should be left up to them if they would like to include like white female allies within that, and that's their choice to make or not. Does anybody, I don't know if we should open that up. Does anybody else have any ideas about that?
Because I'm reading a book, I forgot what, and I have it written down. It's this book, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. That's how I've been reading. As I was reading this book, I remember she said she didn't like it when people from other countries try to come in and do things for them, because it's just kind of, they think they know what they need. And another thing I heard once from a TED Talk was how sometimes they don't respect the culture because they're not from that culture. And that's why it is kind of hard to bring in other people to help that culture. that's another thing that makes it difficult with that. And being Latina, I do have a hard time finding other Latino feminists.
Okay. Oh, was that a? I didn't know if you had your hand up or if it was.
Oh, no, my head is just like how.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I have one question. I know that a lot of times in feminist activism and gender studies, they often bring up that while a lot of men may recognize how the differences in men and women are social or historical products of patriarchy, a lot of times they seem to, in their quest to sort of promote equality, still somehow hold the male standard as recognition of an achievement of full equality, and in the process seem to see as anything backward, anything that's deemed feminine in the process. And I'm thinking like examples like sometimes men may make sort of passive arguments about natural beauty, or like if a woman puts on makeup and a man may see that as somehow inauthentic, yet they don't recognize that what they're doing is putting a masculine standard as an achievement of equality, and not appreciating somebody who just wants to wear makeup. And I don't know if there's ever been situations where just activities that are deemed feminine are put down by revolutionary leftists, and they don't. And I don't know if that's. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen, or if that's been if that's a problem, or maybe you disagree with what I'm trying to say. I was just wanting more or less know what your thoughts were.
What, as far as like leftist men looking down at things that they deem like feminine or effeminate?
I don't know if that's been a problem.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that, that happens a lot, as far as like to the specific example you gave about like, oh, well, they shouldn't wear makeup or have, natural beauty. Well, I mean, I feel like that's pretty applicable to what I, talked about men, making some judgment about like a female revolutionary, like either negative or positive based on her like appearance. Like, shouldn't matter. She can like wear makeup or not. She can dress in a stereotypical feminine way or stereotypical unfeminine way, and that has nothing to do with like she's there to do like work, and the work she does and her ideas are what need to be valued. Okay. Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we can call it a night.